welcome back to Next Wave Conversations presented by the Innovate GPT Group. As always, I'm your host, Chris Lukianenko, and today we're diving deep into the future of education with a true pioneer in the field, Dr. Nora Koslowski, who is a globally recognised expert on innovation, education and workforce development. Nora has just recently embarked on a new venture as co-founder and CEO of Even, the new career platform for women, so I'm really keen to hear more about that in our chat. But also in this episode, we'll explore how generative AI is revolutionising learning and leadership development. Nora brings a wealth of experience from setting up innovation units to transforming educational strategies. So buckle up as we unpack the impact of AI on tomorrow's leaders, I should say. Welcome aboard. Is it Nora or Dr. Nora?
It's just Nora.
It is Nora. So, thanks for joining me. I was saying to you earlier, I think you're my highest profile guest today, so this is absolutely fantastic. I emailed you about this during the week, and this podcast is about generative AI and all of its applications. And I think that you are far more qualified than I am to be hosting this podcast because, listeners, let me tell you that Nora has actually interviewed Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and one of the most influential trailblazers in this space at the moment. Before we get into all of your career highlights and everything, just tell me, how was that interviewing him?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm delighted to be here, Chris.
Sorry if I'm giving you the chance to speak. My apologies.
No, but that was certainly a really interesting career moment and just fascinating to actually get to sit down with Sam Altman. So last year, some of you will remember, he did a global tour. So he took in, it must have been over 25 countries across the globe. So he met with heads of state and he met with user groups of the AI tools that they're producing to understand what user groups were saying, what they were finding useful, what they wanted, and then also to talk to heads of state about regulation, of course, because at the time, a lot of the regulation hadn't been passed yet.
Yes, yep.
So yeah, it's a pretty important time for them. I think they were only really just sort of 6 months into their sort of very public journey. So that was in June 2023.
Yep.
And so we got the opportunity. So he traveled up to Canberra, met with Ed Husich in Canberra, and then he flew down to Melbourne, and there was about 2,500 people in the convention centre.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was a very high pressure moment, and so I got to sit down. And what was delightful is that even though I did send some questions and advice, there was not a whole lot of sort of you can or you can ask.
Yeah,
it wasn't
great.
scripted. It was just actually there was a bit of advice around like ask him some things that maybe others haven't asked because he's been to 25 countries. He's done 25 of those interviews.
Yep.
But, other than that, just keep it conversational and follow what you're interested in, which was, a whole lot of freedom, actually.
In terms of being an interviewer, that's the absolutely perfect scenario. You've got a guest who can have a chat with you and talk through the issues, but not have to be scripted to everything they do.
Exactly. Yeah. So there was none of that. And he was very open. Was really happy to go into any topic, and he stayed for a long time. So I had about 25 minutes on stage with him, but then there was also a whole lot of audience Q&A, and I think that must have gone for about almost an hour. So it was really just receptive and interested in what people had to say and what they were curious in. But I think the thing that really struck me the most, I guess, is one of the questions I asked him was, you've been on this world tour. What have you not been asked, or what are you a bit frustrated about that nobody's asking you, whether they're heads of states or whether they're researchers or AI users? And at that point, he said, what was slightly frustrating is that most people were asking about the risk, that people were still failing to see the true potential exactly of where this could go and what's possible. And so I thought, that was quite interesting.
I agree, because here we are 12 months down the track, and the fear is still there. We're doing our best to sort of talk about that, but my goodness, the benefits are just coming out of every single corner right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the progress that we've seen in the last year, I think, has been incredible. And, so many people that I know have just embedded AI into their day-to-day workflow and have made such gains when it comes to productivity and efficiency.
Yep.
But yeah, I think also, again, we're still in that space where there's still so many unknowns and so many risks as well. And yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see how it evolves.
Great. Oh, look, I'm very envious. Did you happen to go out maybe to have a drink afterwards with him and have a bit of a chat?
No. So that was all very structured. There was about like 9 security people. It was very seamlessly organized, and he had a very tight schedule.
I noticed that you've got no security with you today. Just
none of that.
Come to an Airbnb and speak with some random guy from Innovate GPT. No security. Well done, you brave. So, would that be potentially a career highlight for you, do you think? You've had a great career so far.
It was a special moment, and somebody said that must have been the highlight of your career, and I was like, well, I'm 37. If that's the highlight, that's pretty sad, because that's, and also that's a special moment that's not a marker of my career, right? My career is actually about innovation and education, and that's where for me the true impact lies, and that's where my purpose is. So while that was a super special moment, and I love the field of AI, definitely not. I don't think that was the biggest moment of my career so far. There's hopefully more to.
You have had an amazing career in education and innovation. Maybe give us a bit of a background to how you find yourself here at the young age of 37 to have achieved so much.
Yeah, sure. And 38 in a few weeks' time. So definitely getting on a bit. But so you might hear from my accent, there's a bit of a mixed background. So I grew up in Germany and then moved to Ireland as a teenager. And I studied to become a psychologist originally, and then moved into doing a PhD in management. But what I was really interested in was using that domain of psychology and insight into humans and sort of what matters to humans, how we behave, how we interact, and applying that to technology. Yep. So my PhD was on how humans, this was way before COVID, of course, but how people use technology to work from home, how we kind of have these weird and wonderful relationships with technology. We sometimes embed tools with personality.
What year was that you were doing?
2008.
So what was the technology back? Struggling to have it back that far. I don't even know if I would have been allowed to have even mentioned the words work from home back then. Yeah,
so people who were working from home back then were called teleworkers, and they were using laptops, but
fax machines probably.
Maybe not quite, but I'm always surprised when I see companies still having fax machines. I'm like, who are you?
That's bizarre.
But yeah, so did that, became an academic, and taught for a number of years, and then became an academic head of department before the age of 30. And then I got a bit, I guess, sort of bored with, academic life is fabulous because you can follow your curiosity, you can research all of the things that you're interested in, but the impact is very long-term. So you don't really see the impact of what you research until the publication sort of cycle finishes. And so I went into consulting, which was really interesting because at that time I moved to Australia and I got to work with organizations like Suncorp, like Samsung, CBA, NBN, and it was really interesting because I could apply the sort of knowledge that I held, but in a corporate context. Yep. And I could help people through concrete challenges that they were facing within. There were people
faster results, I'm thinking.
Incredible. People could apply them like right then and there. So just giving people a little bit of insight into how do you talk to somebody, how do you give feedback, just some leadership practices. You could see just what a difference that made. And from there, then I moved back into higher education. So Melbourne Business School hired me in 2020. And this was a couple of weeks before COVID hit.
Just because they come to Melbourne and be with us and get locked down for a couple of years.
So that was an interesting challenge. So I took on a remit of learning there, but I had the digital learning team under my wing, and there was a tiny sort of investment in digital up to then. I don't know if you know much about Melbourne Business School, but it's it's part of Australia's #1 university. Mm-hmm. Really prestigious education, but also up until then it was very face-to-face, very residential. So downstairs there's teaching spaces, upstairs you have hotel rooms where students come to live on campus. And so for me, the remit was how do you innovate in that scenario, and how do you bring that into a much more flexible and sort of accessible way of delivering education to people.
So we talked a little bit earlier about was that your highest career achievement with Sam Altman, but obviously not in your own space in these last sort of 10 years or so. What do you think has been your absolute pinnacle?
Yeah, so I think there's been a few things, but at Melbourne Business School, it was a phenomenal journey. So I was there for 4 years, and being able to set up digital learning and then actually creating an online brand from scratch. So Melbourne Business School Online was a new brand that I had the privilege to create with my team, which was amazing because you could see, again, like I said, it's heritage, prestige institution, but we were able to, create this new brand, which was, if you even just look at the faces of that brand online, Melbourne Business School Online, it looks much more diverse. It looks younger. It looks like something that people can relate to.
Nice.
Whereas it's not sort of, on a pedestal and super sort of hard to relate to or very kind of daunting or intimidating. It's not that. It's accessible. So that was a massive achievement. And just being able to create the first online MBA for Melbourne Business School, lots of online short courses, and then also got to partner with phenomenal organizations. So we set up with Google and News Corp, for example, we set up these academies, digital first academies, where people all over the country are learning in partnership with Google and News Corp about digital journalism. So it's just been an incredible privilege to lead that.
It's amazing. I feel like, there is so much more to come in the education space, higher education, whether it be generative AI or whatever. There's a lot that can be changed because that old model of learning is so old, and, the old one book lecture, all that sort of thing. I just feel like there's so many great things to come in education. But then you've got left the...
I know. Well, I'm still very much, I guess my heart is still always going to be in education in some way, shape or form. And I should say also, my husband's also an academic at Sydney Uni. And so the two of us we connect over sort of academic, the sort of the curiosity and investigation of ideas. And that will always be part of who I am and what I do. But one of the things I did find, so with Melbourne Business School, I was really fortunate to create, and this was with my now co-founder, Ellen Sullivan. We were able to create an innovation hub within Melbourne Business School. So this was sort of, if you think about Melbourne Business School Online, that was, I guess, adjacent innovation for brand. Online was in some ways innovative, but I wouldn't call it true disruptive innovation. It was just a new new way of delivering education. So adjacent innovation. But then with my now co-founder, Ellen, we set up what was called MBS which was an innovation hub. So that was deep partnership with startups in education, so edtech businesses. It was partnerships with corporates and really thinking about what are new business models in the future of learning that will help us to keep pace with changing consumer expectations and with the need to deliver learning at work and kind of in a much more integrated fashion. So, and that's actually how through that is how I actually got to do the interview with Sam Altman as well. So it was through that innovation hub where we partnered with people all across the entire Australian innovation ecosystem and got to meet, venture capital firms, got to meet kind of startup hubs and all of those.
Awesome. Well, you've just mentioned that you have got a co-founder that you've been creating something with, and that is obviously what I mentioned in the opening, which is Even, your new venture. I want to know about it. Like, you talked about your husband. I mentioned my wife. My wife is an absolute powerhouse. She runs a project management consultancy down in Hobart. She's been CEO of companies down there. Big into tech when there's been like one woman and blokes in the room. Yep. So, I'm very passionate about, opening the doors to young women to get into this field and anything that we can do, because that's also very close to her heart. I've seen the effects on her in the past when she has been that single female in the room and how hard it can be. Yeah. So I saw on LinkedIn that you were launching Even. This sounds pretty cool. I want to know a bit more about it. So can you just give us a bit of the overall concept of how it came to be?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Even is the career platform for women. And we founded Even because we could see, so with the work that Ellen and I had been leading at Melbourne Business School, we could see the impact of flexible education and what that actually enables when you don't have to do learning outside of your work, but especially as a woman, if you can integrate learning into the flow of your work, what that does in terms of giving you access to further career opportunities. But at the same time, we could see that there was still so much more that sort of was holding women back. So thinking about, the sort of uneven burden of caring responsibilities, thinking about just some of the barriers that we're facing, structural barriers within institutions. And so we started sharing our personal experience with each other about, what has life been like as a woman trying to combine career and caring. Both of us have 2 children. Both of our kids are 4 and 7. And while we feel like we've been incredibly lucky and supported, we've also had really, some quite sad experiences of being discriminated against, or being told things like, oh, it's an inconvenience that you're pregnant, or, we won't promote you into the leadership role because you're pregnant, or things like that, which are, I think, they should belong to the past and they shouldn't happen anymore, but unfortunately they still do. And so with that sort of shared awareness and personal experience of that problem space, we started looking into some of the statistics, and they were astounding to us. So the problem statement that we're currently working on within Even is that in Australia, despite the fact that we're a really wealthy country, women are on average more educated than men when it comes to undergraduate degree level education. But the participation rate for women in paid work is actually lower than it should be. So 62% of women of working age participate fully in economic activity, which to us is just much too low. So for men, it's over 70%. Yeah. In other countries like Japan, it is over 70% for women as well. And so we thought that's really puzzling. And then at the same time, we also had many of the employers that we had been working with over the last decade, some of it as part of Melbourne Business School and before then, we knew that they were facing really significant and often protracted skills shortages as well. So we thought, and people were talking about productivity, all over the last year. It's been like the big productivity puzzle for Australia. So we just thought there must be a way for women to be supported better, and for women to be part of the answer to that skills and productivity challenge.
Yep.
So our thesis with Even is we are seeking to get more women into the areas where there's growth in the economy. So thinking about that transition in Australia from a resource-intensive economy to the knowledge economy and to sort of tech and innovation economy. Often these jobs are highly paid, and how do we drive up the number of women in those jobs and at a senior level in those jobs, which actually would help with pay gaps as well. And then how do we drive up the number of women in work, just general participation? Yep. And then lastly, the leadership pipeline as well. So many of the organizations we were working with, they're really struggling with, I think right now, ASX 200, we have something like 22% of CEOs are female, which is just crazy. So for us, these are three very big success metrics for Even.
Yep.
And we're currently at MVP stage with the business. And by July, we'll be launching our first pilot. So we're currently talking to a number of organizations. And the way that the Even platform works is that employers can sign up women who are part of their workforce onto the platform, and they get an annual subscription, which gives them unlimited access to digital-first flexible education.
Yes. Okay.
So in areas like AI, products, cyber, data, but also career support, financial support, thinking about financial literacy and sort of financial equity at home. And just with support around how do you juggle the demands of life and work.
Do you take that online support out into the real world with, support groups and functions and all that sort of thing as well?
Yeah, so it is digital first, but there's definitely, so one of the sort of cornerstone products of Even is that in addition to that unlimited education, we think education is part of the equation, but it's not the full, it's not the full deal. So there's going to be structured peer coaching. So all of the women on the platform are going to be based on the challenge that they're facing. They're going to be put into these peer groups with other women from other industries, but all with a shared challenge. So it could be 10 women who are all just returning from parental leave. Could be 10 women who are all wanting to step up into the next sort of leadership role. Nice. And then they've got a coach who meets with them every 2 weeks as a group and gives them some structured support for 6 months.
I like that. My wife talks about championing people and becoming another person's champion sort of thing.
Yeah.
The power of that. I've seen that in a room when she goes and speaks to people, just that, at her age, some of the younger ones that are in their sub-30s or whatever, they just gravitate towards her. I just want to get a little bit of advice. So if you can bottle that idea up and then, expand it and augment it, I think that's just magnificent.
Exactly. It's the power of mentoring it's so real. And I've benefited so much from, I've had incredible sponsors over the course of my career, both as an academic. I've had deans, deputy deans, vice chancellors, deputy vice chancellors supporting me. And then also I've had, my one of my most recent bosses has probably been my most significant sponsor. But the question for us is, how do you scale that? And how do you also, for women who are not as privileged, to have people invest in them How do you make that possible? So I think, that's, but I absolutely agree with what your wife is seeing there. It's just such an important thing to have, but we want to make it more accessible.
And how focused are you on the tech industry? Because I'm not sure if you've noticed, but we might have a bit of a issue in tech with diversity and the gender split.
Yes.
So important. I don't know what the answer is to this, because we always have been talking about for so many years, like getting to the young kids in their teens and pumping them through STEM things where they go and maybe they'll go and talk about coding and engineers and they think, this is boring, but there's so many other opportunities within it. I don't have the answer, but, I'm pretty passionate about trying to fix that because, I can see firsthand, how much of a difference it makes when you do have other ideas coming around the table. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm as passionate as you are about that topic. I don't think there's one single answer that's going to help for the level of representation of women in tech. I do think it starts early. It starts early with sort of helping girls to see that you can have a broad range of interests, and it's not, boys are good at maths and girls are not. It has to start early. But then also, I think it's just at the level where women are already in their career. I think it's taking away the intimidation that can happen when you enter a a tech workforce or a tech organization. It can feel very bulky. Mm-hmm. So with even what we're really trying to do is demystify tech careers. So we are getting experts that are, women who've worked at organizations like Google, and we're getting them to give advice to women who are earlier on in their career about how do you break into that landscape. And, how do you actually take away the fear with technology?
Yep. I'm sitting here running through because obviously we're a Gen AI aligned podcast with the Innovate GPT group, sort of specialising in that area. And I'm thinking to myself, what is the Gen AI play for Eden? Because obviously you're all about innovation and education. Have you had thoughts about where Gen AI might sort of come into this whole mix?
Yeah, right now I don't think you could start a business without thinking about what's the role of AI in it, or quite frankly, you shouldn't be even in a legacy business. I think if you don't have a point of view on AI, like what have you been doing for the last 18 months? But that aside, I think in learning, there's so much potential for the application of AI into learning. Mm-hmm. And some of the most significant applications are for personalization, which is in the Eden platform. That's also a key sort of aspect of it. So there's based on understanding preferences, based on understanding women's backgrounds and their goals, you can personalize and branch the different learning pathways and the recommendations that they receive as to this is, a suitable next course for you or this bit of content. So that makes perfect sense. But I've also seen really interesting other applications in the last year that I don't know if you or your listeners have sort of talked about it or shared some of them. But, right now we're producing content. There's so many new tools that actually make that production of content cheaper and just so much quicker. Yep. So I've been following businesses like Colossian and Synthesia. Yes. So thinking about how do you think about video production with your AI avatar rather than having to do it all.
Did you know there's actually a Melbourne-based crowd doing that as well?
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm speaking to him this week from Verbalate.
Wow. Okay.
And they're in Melbourne. So, watch this space for those guys doing very much that same sort of stuff with the avatars and translation, which I think is massive.
The translation aspect as well, that's just mind-blowing. Yeah. But think about how much time that would have taken in the past if you're creating learning content and you then have to translate it. If you think about all of the closed captioning and, like I said, video creation, all of that can now be augmented. And some of it, I think, is still not at the level where if you're developing a premium product, maybe you wouldn't want to necessarily use it, but I think you definitely need to be playing with it in order to understand.
I think it's like everything with Gen AI, you need to also have that human element of the check, just to make sure, we were talking earlier, I'm Ukrainian. I've used HeyGen and Synthesia and Verbalate to do some stuff, and I sent my dad a message in Ukrainian where I'd spoken in English and then translated it.
Using HeyGen?
Yeah. And he couldn't understand half of it because he came out to Australia in World War II as a refugee. So his Ukrainian is very different to modern Ukrainian. He's like, what are you saying to me? So I just thought, Ukrainian, easy, can sort it out. But you do have to have that human element in there as well, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And the same with, there's so many tools that help to build courses or build content as well. In my previous team at Melbourne Business School, we played with CourseBox, which builds an entire sort of online learning course within the space of 3 minutes. And it's great for efficiency, but I think where we're still, what I'm still seeking is the increase in quality. So I think efficiency, productivity is great right now, but actual high quality is where I think you still need to think about augmenting human and AI tools.
So what about in your own personal life? Are you using Gen AI to, augment yourself, become, Dr. Nora 2.0 or something like that?
I'm certainly experimenting and playing around, but I also have to say, so I'm probably more of the optimist in our whole life, but my husband investigates ethics with relation to big data. He's currently running experiments on algorithmic aversion. So he's really into investigating responsible AI. So we probably, the kind of conversations that we have about privacy and data sharing at home, I think they're very important, and they sometimes do limit the amount of experimentation, because there's some platforms that I personally wouldn't be happy giving my data to. And so I think you have to always have a sort of, especially in your personal life, that if you've got children, again, like, you share their data, you sharing their pictures or videos. I think you've got to balance the level of experimentation and enthusiasm and optimism with responsible use and with critical thinking about, who might have access to this and what can they do on the basis of it. Yeah.
Where are you at with the bias in these models from a male-female type perspective? Have an opinion on that? I don't know if you want to go up a can of worms, but it just sort of sprang into my mind.
Yeah. Well, I think, so when it comes to AI, I think there's this sort of, we need to be sure that we're not building bias into it. And if you've got, if men are building the tools, then of course there's going to be bias built into it because they're built by a certain demographic.
Yep.
So I think that's important to make sure that those who build a tool actually in some way represent the user group that the tool is built for. And then I think it's also the user group itself. I think what I find curious there is, so I found a statistic from 2023, which said that about half of men were experimenting with AI tools in their work, but only something like 20% of women.
Oh, really?
And to me, that's also a bit of a strange sort of finding, because again, thinking about the career impacts, which is, what I'm all about with Even now. Yeah. If you've got men who are sort of more in that domain of AI, and if that's where the future of tech's going, if that's where organizations are going, and if that's where the sort of jobs of the future are going, we need to be sure that we get women into that world as well, again, because of the impacts on gender pay gap.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't even think of that, but I sort of thinking in my eyes, again, back to my wife, does a lot of stuff. And I think into myself, there'd be so many great things she could do more of using ChatGPT or whatever it may be to help her. But she doesn't have that interest just now. I don't know whether that's just a time poor thing or whether it's a male-female thing or whatever. But I'm always love to do that experimentation, that techie thing. I don't necessarily think that further down the track, like you were talking about with the sharing of information. I'm like, this is cool, this is shiny, I've got to try it.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's a personality thing in my house because my wife is a little bit more considered in her thought, perhaps.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've got a good mix of sort of optimism and perhaps a bit of caution in there as well, which maybe we need in that world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting stuff. So what about the future of Even? Where are you heading with this, do you think? Are you think you change the world, or is a small change enough? How big are you dreaming?
Yeah.
Like you said, you're only 37. You've got plenty of time to develop this thing.
Yeah. So we, so with Even, Ellen and I are seeking to bring 100,000 women through Even in the next 5 years. And we do think it's possible because it's a scalable solution. We're certainly starting in Australia with organizations that we know. Who trust us and we want to work with them. But from there, we're certainly thinking about what might come after, whether that's geographic expansion or whether the product itself expands as well. Yeah. But I think, you can't, like, if you think about something like the statistic, around 62% of women of working age participate. If you want to bring that up, if you want to bring up the number of women in leadership roles, the number of women in tech roles, it can't be a small thing. So we're going to have to think big, and we're going to have to, there's so many different partners doing amazing things already in the gender space. So it's about how do we also partner in order to achieve those goals.
Do you think, we're talking about security before the Gen AI, do you think a private language model might be part of your future at that business?
Haven't thought about it. I do. I mean, I love watching what some businesses in Australia and overseas are doing with regard to, building their own private models. And I think that's appropriate where, privacy is a significant concern, or where they're in industries where, information is very sensitive. I'm not sure that even is in that world necessarily. So I know one local law firm has done that, and I can see how that's perfect for them. I don't think for a small business, it's probably not where I want to invest my limited time and resources.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I was just thinking 100,000 women with a whole bunch of information, backstories, careers, challenges, dreams, all that. Like, that's rich data.
Yeah.
That is rich data.
Yeah.
Could, who knows what Gen AI could discover about that. That's the thing that's been blowing my mind lately, where I can upload something and just those insights that I don't have the time to find those insights. I don't have the brain to discover those insights. What can these language models discover about us that we struggle to find out about ourselves?
Yeah. But for me, that's the bigger sort of unsolved equation in education and in higher education, but other forms of education as well. As just, I think people haven't really realized what you can do with the data about students, and how educational solutions and degrees could be so much better if you actually used the data that you have access to, understanding, who are your students, what do they want, where do they spend their time, what's their behavior, where are they heading. So thinking about, it doesn't even have to be AI, it can just be descriptive or predictive analytics. How do you actually use all of that rich data and then create an offering that's so much more meaningful and personalized to their goals and aspirations?
The Netflix of higher education, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, we've spoken about that a bit at work, that's maybe that's the future, because our kids, they don't want to go to a classroom at 9:30 a.m. on a Tuesday to sit in front of a lecture to do that. They want to learn how they want, when they want, where they want, and all that sort of thing. And that might be 1 a.m. in the morning after playing on the PlayStation or something like, using the PlayStation to get that education. It's an amazing, for so many opportunities.
Yeah.
I feel like you're, maybe at a really exciting point in your career moving forward from here. You've had a great career so far, but as I said to you, young, so many more things to come in your career. So I wish you all the best, and I'll be looking on at where you go with Eden. So I think it's a magnificent platform. I think what you're doing is great stuff. So thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.